Today we begin an extensive examination of the French and Indian War, a significant event that deeply influenced the course of American history. Although it often lies in the shadow of the American Revolution, this conflict laid the foundations for many of the subsequent tensions and events that shaped the early United States. By the end of this detailed exploration, you will possess an in-depth understanding of the war's context, critical events, and long-term consequences. Understanding the French and Indian War requires insight into larger European rivalries that extended into North America. By the mid-18th century, the New World had become battleground for European powers eager to expand their colonial empires. France controls two vast regions in North America, Canada and Louisiana. These territories were sparsely populated and heavily reliant on fur trade, which formed the backbone of French colonial economy. Their alliances with Native American tribes, especially the Huron and Algonquin, were critical to maintaining this trade and ensuring military support. The French established an intricate network of forts and trading posts along major waterways, including the St. Lawrence River, Great Lakes, and Mississippi River, to maintain their territorial claims. In contrast, Britain's colonies were more densely populated and economically diverse. Stretching along the Atlantic seaboard, the 13 colonies had developed into robust economies based on agriculture, trade, and manufacturing. Each colony specialized in different industries, such as fishing, shipbuilding, and plantation farming. This growing economic strength, however, was accompanied by rising tensions between the colonies and the British Crown over issues like taxation and trade regulations. Spain and smaller powers like the Dutch and Swedish also held territories in North America. Although Spain played a more indirect role in the French and Indian War, their control over Florida and Western territories added complexity to the geopolitical landscape. The Dutch and Swedish colonies were eventually absorbed by larger British and French domains. Native American tribes were key players in the conflict, not passive observers. They had their own interests in the struggle between France and Britain and leveraged these rivalries to gain advantages in territorial and political disputes. The Iroquois Confederacy, one of the most powerful alliances of Native American tribes, often aligned with the British to counterbalance the French-aligned Huron and Algonquin tribes. Understanding these alliances is crucial to grasping the nuances of the war. The French and Indian War was the culmination of a series of earlier conflicts between France and Britain, each contributing to rising tensions. The first of these type of wars was the King William's War that lasted between 1689 and 1697. This conflict, marked by border raids and skirmishes, was part of the larger War of Grand Alliance in Europe. Both sides attacked each other's colonies with the help of Native American allies. Another colonial war, Queen Anne's War, was part of the War of Spanish Succession. The British successfully captured Port Royal in Acadia, but the conflict ended with the Treaty of Utrecht, which maintained a fragile balance of power. The third of these imperial wars, King George War, was part of the War of Austrian Succession. One of its notable events was the British capture of Louisbourg, a French fortress which was returned to France in exchange for British territories in India. The Ohio River Valley was at the heart of the French and Indian War. This fertile region, encompassing present-day Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, and parts of Pennsylvania and Indiana, became the focal point of European imperial ambitions and Native American alliances. The Ohio Valley's waterways, particularly the confluence of the Ohio, Allegheny, and Monongahela rivers, made it a crucial hub for transportation and trade. Controlling this area gave either Britain or France dominance over trade routes that extended deep into North America's interior. The fertile soil of the Ohio Valley was ideal for agriculture, attracting British colonists seeking new lands for farming. Crops like corn, wheat, and tobacco thrived, offering lucrative opportunities for expansion and trade. Both France and Britain sought to expand their territories in the Ohio Valley. France hoped to secure its fur trade network, while Britain aimed to establish permanent settlements and push westward beyond the Appalachian Mountain. Tensions escalated in the Ohio Valley as both France and Britain attempted to fortify their claims. These early clashes set the stage for full-scale war. France was quick to fortify its presence in the Ohio Valley, constructing a series of forts to reinforce its territorial claims. The most significant of these was Fort Duquesne, built at the confluence of Allegheny and Monongahela rivers. This strategic location allowed the French to control access to the Ohio River and maintain their trade and military network. In 1753, the governor of Virginia sent a young George Washington to deliver a message to the French demanding that they leave the Ohio Valley. The French refused, leading Washington to return in 1754 with a small force to build a fort at the strategic forks of the Ohio River. However, French forces captured the site and completed Fort Duquesne. In May 1754, Washington's forces clashed with the French Reconnaissance Party led by Jumonville in a skirmish known as the Battle of Jumonville Glen. The brief but intense engagement left Jumonville dead, an event that France viewed as an assassination. This skirmish was one of the sparks that ignited the French and Indian War. After the skirmish, Washington hastily built Fort Necessity at Great Meadows. In July 1754, a larger French force led by Jumonville's brother attacked the fort, forcing Washington to surrender. The defeat, though humiliating, marked Washington's first significant military engagement and provided him with valuable experience in frontier warfare. With tensions between Britain and France now in open conflict, the French and Indian War progressed with several key battles and strategic shifts. In the early years of the war, the French held the upper hand largely due to their alliances with Native American tribes. These alliances allowed the French to conduct raids and maintain control over key regions. In 1757, William Pitt became Britain's Secretary of State and dramatically shifted British strategy. He sent more troops to North America, forged better relations with Native American tribes, and used the British Navy to cut off French supplies. This marked a significant turning point in the war. Several pivotal battles helped the British gain the upper hand. The British captured Louisbourg in 1758, cutting off French access to the St. Lawrence River and paving the way for eventual capture of Quebec. The Battle of Quebec, fought on September 13, 1759, was a critical turning point in the 7 Years' War. General James Wolfe led the British forces in a daring and successful night assault, scaling the cliffs that overlooked the city of Quebec. The surprise attack caught the French forces commanded by Montcalm off guard. The battle was fierce, but the British victory decisively shifted control of Canada from the French to the British. This victory not only marked a significant military achievement, but also set the stage for the eventual British dominance in North America, fundamentally altering the geopolitical landscape of the continent. With the capture of Montreal in 1760, the British effectively ended French military resistance in North America. The fall of Montreal cemented Britain's dominance in the region. The French and Indian War was part of the global 7 Years' War, which involved most of Europe's major powers. Battles were fought across multiple continents, including in Europe, the Caribbean, and India. In India, British forces led by Robert Clive defeated the French at the Battle of Plassey, securing British dominance in the Indian subcontinent. The war formally ended with the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1763. This treaty redrew the map of North America. Britain gained control over Canada and all French territories east of the Mississippi River. France ceded Louisiana to Spain as compensation for Spain's loss of Florida to Britain. Spain retained control over Western territories, while France kept a few small islands in the Caribbean. Before we discuss the impact of the French-Indian War, we should talk about an important event that occurred during the war. That is the Albany Congress of 1754. The Albany Congress of 1754 was a significant meeting where delegates from 8 British colonies gathered in Albany, New York to address rising tensions with the French and their Native American allies in the Ohio Valley. It can be vividly illustrated by Benjamin Franklin's famous image of a segmented snake with the caption "Join or Die." This powerful symbol underscored the critical need for colonial unity. In the image, each segment of the snake represented an individual colony, disjointed and incapable of survival if left separate. Franklin used this analogy to stress the idea that the colonies, if they remained divided, would be vulnerable to threats such as the French and their Native American allies, much like how a segmented snake would die if its parts remained apart. At the Congress, Franklin put forward the Albany Plan of Union, which was essentially an attempt to bind the segments of the snake together into a cohesive force. His plan proposed a Grand Council composed of representatives from the colonies and a President General appointed by the Crown. The governing body would manage shared concerns like defense and relations with the Native American tribes, addressing the colony's collective security. However, much like the snake remained separated in the cartoon, Franklin's proposal was rejected by both the British government and the colonial assemblies. The British feared that a united colonial government might become too powerful and independent, while the colonies themselves were reluctant to give up local autonomy. Despite this failure, the Albany Plan planted the seeds of unity that would later take root in movements like the Continental Congress and the Articles of Confederation, as the colonies realized they could only survive and thrive if they worked together. The British victory in the French and Indian War had profound consequences both for Britain and its American colonies. Britain sought to tighten its control over the colonies to manage its growing empire. The Proclamation of 1763, which prohibited settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains, angered colonists eager to expand. Additionally, Britain imposed new taxes such as Sugar Act and Stamp Act to pay off its war debt, further inflaming colonial resentment. The war fostered a sense of unity among the colonies who had cooperated in a common cause. This spirit of unity would later be crucial in the lead-up to the American Revolution. The loss of French support left many Native American tribes vulnerable to British encroachment, leading to conflicts like the Pontiac's Rebellion in 1763. The French and Indian War was a transformative event in the history of North America. It reshaped colonial boundaries, laid the groundwork for future American discontent with British rule, and set the stage for American Revolution. This conflict, while often overshadowed, was a critical moment that changed the course of history on the continent and beyond.